Yes, so I'm Marguerite Rigoglioso of Seven Sisters Mystery School, and I'm based in California, San Rafael, California.
That's fabulous. Can you tell us a little bit about your life journey and how you came to this point, Marguerite?
Yeah. So I always begin this tale with essentially the death of my mother in this lifetime when I was young, when I was 10 years old. And that event really ended up being what was an initiation into the death realms and into the realms in particular of the mother-daughter goddesses, Demeter and Persephone. So they too experience a separation, and it's an initiation for both of them. And so for me, that opened me to what is death, what are the realms beyond death, and that brings you to the great mysteries of what is there beyond 3 dimensions, what is consciousness. And so when I, a couple of decades later, when I was really ready to start the healing part of my journey, I began with kind of psychological, emotional healing, but quickly became very interested in the sacred feminine and women and self-esteem. And I learned that women have sort of a core wound in the society, because there's no, especially in the West and especially in the modern world, there's no reflection of them as being legitimate aspects of the divine, or legitimate reflections of the divine. And that began me on a journey of discovery to, well, what is the sacred feminine? And, oh, there are goddesses. Somehow instinctively I had known this, but I finally started receiving the information through various teachers and teachings. And I began going on trips abroad to Europe, for example, where there had been sites of ancient goddess worship, and I began studying deeply all of this material from the scholarly perspective, and I began participating in women's programs and women's spiritual rituals, and that led me to really want to deepen my knowledge and my understanding, both academically and spiritually. And I had become really fascinated with the work of the archaeologist Marija Gimbutas from Lithuania, who was really the first major archaeologist to say that Old Europe, which is where my ancestors are from, was originally venerating of a goddess or more than one goddesses, and was very matrifocal or mother-centered in nature. And so that I had wanted to continue in her footsteps archaeologically, but I wasn't finding programs that were supportive of me in that, in continuing to conduct her work or follow her road. So I ended up going to a women's spirituality program at the California Institute of Integral Studies, and I got my Ph.D. and prior to that my master's in essentially philosophy, religion, and humanities, but my focus was always on women's spiritual traditions, particularly in the West and Europe, women's spiritual leadership, the sacred feminine, and how that all comes together. And that led me to ancient Greece and the work that I did on my dissertation, and then that turned into 2 books. The Cult of Divine Birth in Ancient Greece was the first one, and Virgin Mother Goddesses of Antiquity was the second one.
Talked about that we're moving into a feminine phase indeed, from this patriarchally based culture that's existed for many millennia. And if we are moving into this more feminine phase, what do you think it might look like, and how do you think it might serve the planet?
Yes, I do believe that we're moving into a more feminine phase, and I see that all around me. I feel that I am part of that movement, and I continue to receive guidance and information that we are moving into that, which is more to say a phase of integration of the yin and the yang. And I prefer to use yin and yang rather than masculine and feminine, because those qualities are characteristics of moving out and receiving in are characteristics that both males and females and folks of all genders can have. So I see it as a time of integration of those types of qualities. And what the healing balm that the yin will bring is more focus on receptivity, on quiet, on listening, on becoming more internal to hear the guidance of the intelligence that is beyond 3 dimensions. I do think it's going to be a time focused more on the heart. What I'm shown, and it does correspond with what many other teachers have been shown, is that, you know, if we're going to look at humanity from the chakra system, which is the central channel of the body and the energy systems that are here, the third one, which is at the navel, is the one that humanity has been grappling a lot with, which has to do with issues of power. And in its distorted form, it has to do with issues of control, power over other people, anger, suppression, rage, and also this is where grief can dwell. So what I'm shown is that humanity is being encouraged to move from the 3rd chakra of will up through a kind of a membrane to the 4th chakra of the heart. And I believe that that's what the forces of yin that women tend to carry often a bit more than men are going to help us usher in. Also, there's a way, one of the things that can come up when we talk about the reintegration of the feminine or the yin in the world and the resurgence of women, you know, in their power, is, okay, what do men do? You know, is there still a role for them, or should they be afraid about this or in opposition? And my thought is, this is so going to benefit men, women, and people of all genders, this reintegration, because it's going to add a sense of relaxation, a sense of love, a sense of comfort for everyone. And it's going to help men be able to relax from that, the demands that are somehow socially put on them, particularly in the West, that they must conquer, vanquish, be a certain type in order to be worthy, be identified with their careers, be the so-called breadwinner, and so forth and so on. This is really all about equalizing and rebalancing everything so that they don't have to be in their hyper yang mode anymore, which I think is quite exhausting for men. And women can, you know, there's just going to be much more of a cooperation in general. And I think that it's going to be very, very beneficial for all genders. And I know of men from matriarchal societies. These are societies of peace and balance that are all around the world. For example, the Mosuo in China, or the Mosu as they're called. And the men in that culture, when they speak, they say, this is the greatest thing in the world. There's so much more balance for us. We have so much more psychological well-being under this kind of a setup. So I think that that's what men can expect as well, and that there's going to be more place for them to have their emotions, and yeah, instead of...
Because there are a lot of men at the moment, or a number of men at the moment, who've had bad experiences with the feminine. They've seen the feminine out of balance, they've seen the feminine in a destructive form, both in the family and in the workplace. And I think some men would have a fear that that is going to perhaps increase, or...
Right.
Do you have any views on that? Do you understand?
You know, under the patriarchal system, everybody has suffered, and everybody has become wounded, everybody has become distorted. Women, men, people of all genders. And therefore, mothers and fathers have not been in their best, highest self raising their children, and they've passed on a lot of pain, wounding, neuroses, whatever we want to call them. So yes, it's understandable that some women would have had negative experiences with men or their fathers or their uncles or brothers in their lives, and some men would have had negative experiences with the mothers, aunts, sisters, grandmothers, and so forth in their lives. I think under the new paradigm of the yin coming in more strongly, there's just going to be an overall healing in general. And there's going to be a greater responsibility taking on the part of women for what they are responsible for in terms of what they're putting out, how they're mothering, and so forth, as well as men. And there's also going to be a much more of, a return to the loving energies. So, yeah, that's how I think that, everybody's going to benefit, and that nobody really need fear what's happening here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk today in women's circles about womb wisdom. Can you tell us what you understand by womb wisdom?
Yeah. The womb, as a part of woman's body, is not just a biological, sort of physiological location, but it's also a spiritual and energetic place and a portal. It's a portal for divine energies. It's a portal for a soul to be able to come in. It's also a portal by which women can receive information from realms beyond 3D. Traditionally, it's been a place where women in the ancient oracles, it's been one of the chakras where they have drawn in other kinds of spiritual knowledge. So it's not always just, the third eye or the upper chakras, but it's sometimes the womb. And there's just a great deal of biological wisdom itself in the womb, which, the information I've received is that the womb is actually a holographic miniature of the entire cosmos, which itself is a womb. And so it would be interesting to see what happens if and when astrophysicists begin to think about that structure. But that by virtue of their physical wombs, women therefore, so if we see then the entire cosmos as a womb, as the goddess, which is how many ancient societies viewed her, which you can see in the ancient wall paintings, cave paintings, the goddess was abstracted down to a womb image or symbol, like a triangle or a seed or a circle or something of that nature. When we see the goddess in that way, and we understand that women are walking goddesses because that they're walking wombs, they have the walking replicas of the goddess in them, that shifts everything. It helps, you can understand why in certain indigenous societies and ancient societies women would have been venerated, and not just in a sentimental way, but as divine, as incarnations of the divine. That's not to say that the masculine is not, but that they contain within themselves the whole on of the universe. And so there is a great deal of wisdom that about the womb and that comes through the womb that I think is going to be something that we're going to be exploring more from spiritual esoteric perspectives and from physiological perspectives as well. Because when you think about from the physical standpoint that the womb is, the place where a soul comes in, it's a miracle. So yes, there's a lot that that's going to happen as women really, really start to connect with this part of their body, mind, spirits.
So you're suggesting that women approach their own womb in a new sort of a way, with a new sort of perspective and understanding. Yeah. And I wonder how you see men approaching women's wombs.
Yeah. So yes, I do see both genders or all genders approaching the womb differently in a much more sacred way with much greater consciousness. And then, of course, the womb is also a portal not just for oracular wisdom and the incarnation of souls from spirit into matter, but it's a portal for creativity, and it's a portal for joy and pleasure in the form of especially sexual pleasure. So I think that women are going to come much more in touch with their divine nature through all of this, and they're going to treat their bodies differently, they're going to treat their cycles differently, they're going to treat their menstruation differently, they're going to treat their conception of children and their gestation and child rearing differently, they're going to treat their crone years or the menopausal years differently, and men will as well correspondingly. I think that when there is a genuine reverence between the masculine and feminine for the other's sacred sexual portal, things shift dramatically. Things shift dramatically in personal relationships, in sexual relationships, and in the relationship with the divine. So there's going to be a divinizing of everything, a resacralizing is what we might say, of everything, by women about themselves, by women for men, by men for women, and by men about themselves as well, and folks of all genders, because there's more than just the binary, as we know.
Marguerite, you've studied Greek myths. You've written a number of well-received books on the topic. What are the lessons that can be brought forward for today's world from those myths?
It's an excellent question. There's the question of what the myths that I've studied in particular and what I find they tell us. And then there's the question in the larger sense of what myths can tell us. I'll address the latter first. I think myths are history. They're either a history when they're in the form of legends about things that went on planet Earth. They're actually talking about earthly histories. When they are myths talking about the gods and the doings of the deities and so forth, they are astral, what I call astral histories. They are describing realities, things that did happen. And even if there's more than one version of the myth, or even if there are contradictory versions of the myths, all are true in some dimension. When we start looking at legend and myth as history, as the Greeks did, it becomes very interesting indeed. It talks to us about a very interesting reality on planet Earth, on the astral or inner planes, and in the interface between those two. So I don't talk about myths as stories or fiction. I talk about them as real events that tell us what happened, why things have happened to some degree, the way they have, and therefore they can point the way toward what needs to happen differently in the future. So, for example, in the myth of the beheading of Medusa, I actually discern that Medusa was an actual historical queen of Africa. And there is a good deal of evidence to support that historical assertion. She's gone back into the mists of legend and even myth, but I think she did exist. That story existed about her beheading, and it was a grave transgression, this killing and beheading of one of the major feminine power leaders on the planet at that time, which would be prehistorical records probably time. And what I mean in terms of remedies that are suggested by the myths, well, if she was beheaded, could she be reheaded? So a number of years ago, I put out a call to have Medusa reheading rituals, and I started one in my Divine Birth Mystery Teachings program. We ritually restored Medusa's head with an effigy, and in Italy they became fascinated with this idea, and so in 2013 17 cities got involved in rituals to create their own effigies and reattach Medusa's head in ritual form. That to me is a movement energetically very powerful to restore the feminine to her own power, to restore her head to her body, to restore her intellect with her body wisdom and womb wisdom. There have been other occasions where, for example, Aphrodite has appeared to me in a trance state, and the message that I received from her was that she would like to be understood in her fullness as a goddess of totality, not just of sexuality and beauty, but also love in the love, compassion, agape sense. So that inspired me to do a ritual called Uniting Aphrodite, Uniting Self, which I actually did a couple of those workshops in the UK, and I did one of those workshops in the United States. And those were very powerful rituals because I was given the method by which to do that. It was to have women visualize uniting their hearts and their wombs through a golden figure 8 that they thread back and forth. And so I've freely given out this ritual and this concept and this practice in my blogs as well. And that again was very powerful. And that, for example, had very powerful repercussions in my life, because I began to meet men who consciously or unconsciously picked up on the fact that I had done that operation on myself. And it's really transformed my relationship with men, because in our society, our sexual activity has often become detached from our love activity. And there is a real integration that's wanting to be happening here. So these are just some of the ways that I think we can work with these histories, aka myths, to remedy things that have gone on the cosmic level and on the human level. And there are many ways that myths also tell us, about the history of what happened, that the goddess essentially was abducted and raped by her own creation, which is the masculine. The masculine emerges out of the feminine in a universe that is the womb. And so when that masculine, which has free will, decides, I'd like to be the most powerful force, so I'm going to rape you by taking over the essential womb of the goddess. That is a serious event. It's a serious transgression. It's encoded in many of the myth stories, like the rape of Persephone and others. And what the myths do tell us, though, is that there's an epic. There is literally what they call an eon. There's a time in which that event is going to have its zenith, and then it's going to cycle back. And so now we're cycling out of the time of rape and back into the time of integration and respect for the feminine and the yin.
Lovely. The ancients seem to suggest that the Pleiades were significant in the origins of people's spiritual development upon the earth. Can you expand on this?
The Pleiades have, in terms of our legends and myths, which is to say our history, have a very big role in humanity. In fact, many traditions around the world, including the Greeks, but many indigenous traditions even today, say that they are from the Pleiades. Many esoteric contemporary teachers channel this information as well, without even knowing that cultures of the past and present have thought this about the Pleiades, which to my mind is validation and affirmation of this information. It's quite complex. And I do talk about this quite a bit. I've done presentations in the UK and in the United States, and I have a webinar that deals with this called Reclaiming Our Starry Origins, because I think that this opening to astral consciousness star origin consciousness is part of what's critical for humanity right now, to expand and telescope back out beyond the earth plane and to look at where we come from. Even Plato said that each person has a star from which he or she has come and to which he or she goes after death. So this is a very alive concept. And in terms of the Pleiades in particular, what I receive, what I read in the ancient culture stories and the contemporary culture stories and out of contemporary channelers and esoteric teachers is that the Pleiades created or seeded a large portion of humanity, if not entirely, at least a large portion. This means seeding human consciousness. There's a current spiritual teacher who affirms, named Matt Kahn, who affirms that actually the Pleiades is the incubator for what becomes human consciousness, as well as the actual physical form of the human body, which involved a tremendous kind of genetic weaving. So it is important to look at these contemporary and ancient stories about Pleiades, to learn more about who they are in relation to us, and who they are in relation to us, not just in that early formation, but how it's gone all throughout this time and what's happening now. And I have a very strong sense from my own information that I receive as well as that of others that the Pleiades are alive and well and talking to us. And they are really encouraging us to do that movement from the third chakra to the fourth chakra of love. And they are really encouraging an integration of the feminine, because there's a whole feminine story to the Pleiades, because they are conceived of as 7 sisters, 7 virgin mothers of the world, who also have an epiphany as the dove, 7 doves. And their story of being 7 mothers of the world actually corresponds with what geneticists are saying. For example, the UK's Brian Sykes, that we can all trace our origins back to 7 women. And he said, when I went to a lecture with him, and he said, and they're all related. So, 7 sisters. I think that the investigation, exploration, excavation, and reintegration of this story is one of the most important things for humanity at this time.
And finally, Marguerite, what one piece of advice would you give that might transform a viewer's life?
My dear friend, Sharon Mazer, recently crossed over from this plane to the other plane. And I participated in the anointing of her sacred body after the passage of her soul. In those 3 days after she had passed, I felt her very closely with me, as did many of the people who had been close to her, which told us that the soul lives outside the body, and the soul is accessible, especially in the period after the crossing. When I was presenting her with various challenges that I was having, because she was almost there like an oracular spirit, to everything I would say, she would say, just be in the love, Marguerite. All there is love. Just be in the love. And I really took that to heart. And it corresponded with work that I've been doing anyway, regarding healing my heart, expanding my heart, connecting my heart with the womb, and entering into a consciousness of what the so-called sacred heart really is. And so what I would say to people is, do your healing. Find the people who can help you to feel your feelings, express and release and integrate all that you have suffered. And in that process, allow yourself to go back into a deep compassion and love for yourself. And as you do that, you will be able to expand and have a deep compassion and love for others that is unconditional and that is non-dependent on the situation at hand. As we all go into this healing and this expansion into love in our own selves, in our own small orbits, in our own lives, the ripples of that are going to affect the world. And if that's all you're responsible for in this lifetime, you will have done a great service to the planet. And that is how the shift and the transformation will be accomplished. It will be through this inner work. And it's focused really very at its simplest core on love.
That's wonderful, Marguerite. Thank you so much. And how can viewers make contact with you at the end of this video?
Yes. So I have a large internet presence through particularly the website, which is 7sistersmysteryschool.com, and the 7 is spelled out S-E-V-E-N, because people sometimes ask me. So 7sistersmysteryschool.com. When you go into the landing page, there are some free audios that you can order if you're interested. If you're not, you can just press no thanks, enter site, and the whole world of the site will pop up, on which there is a lot of information. There are many free audios, articles, videos that I've done, blog posts, as well as information about all of the other resources that I offer, from webinars that are already pre-recorded or yet to come, live programs, events that I'm doing in the United States or in other places of the world, guided meditation CDs, and so forth. So I advise folks to go there, and they can also contact me personally by writing to info@7sistersmysteryschool.com. And again, the 7 is spelled out. I also do have a YouTube channel now. It's Marguerite Rigoglioso, and there are some additional teachings and inspirational pieces that I offer there. So I invite people to be in contact with me. I also, for those who are curious about working with me personally, I offer complimentary half-hour sessions either by Skype or phone. So that's always an option if you want to get to know me better or tell me a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for this opportunity, Rob. I truly appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.